Good afternoon, 5th grade. Today we're going to continue reading in our text, The Birch Bark House. Before we get started, we have a quick write. It says, describe a time when your family depended on you to help them. What was the situation and how did you respond? Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the focus question. Today we want to know, what impact does the visitor have on the community? Our vocabulary words are honor. That's when you show respect to someone. President Obama is honoring a soldier by giving him a medal. The next one is selflessness. That's when you are concerned with the needs of others and not your own. This woman is being selfless. She is helping another woman instead of helping herself. And then last we have contagious. That's when you spread a disease through the germs of another person. So this person is sick and has a cold, and they are shaking the hands of another person. They are contagious, and this other well person might get sick. Go ahead and turn to page 140 in your text, and we're going to use our CSPS strategy. I'm at a fire. A fire was kindled in the center of the dance lodge, and its fragrant smoke rose through the central opening of the roof. The fire was hardly needed, though, in spite of the cold, for the crowd of dancers, the drummers, the children, the old men in the farthest corner gambling, seated on soft skins, and old ladies at their games of gossip. The young women in the center, and the young men surrounding them, the people of all ages, talking, laughing, and dancing, kept the great lodge warm. Amachius loved the drum. The beat throbbed through her, drumming her entirely alive and eager. The soles of her feet tingled. Her hands moved in time to the song. Angeline danced too, wearing her new shawl and holding Grandma's partridge tail fan. Standing at the center with 10 snow, she gracefully bounced to the beat. Thimbles ringing, her body moved in exact time. Mama, when she had only known as that swift girl Yellow Kettle and had no children, had always loved to dance. She bobbed in the corner, contented and proud of her daughters, Miwu alongside her. Even Nokomis couldn't help dancing. Amakia stopped to watch her grandmother step along with such care and dignity. She seemed to be crossing a rushing stream on small stones. Her steps were small and light as a deer's, Amachius thought, watching her proudly. Heat radiated from the fire, and the faces of the girls and young women turned rosy red and warm. Trade silver tokens, bracelets, armbands, crosses flashed and ribbons swirled as the dancers moved in joy and excitement, crying out for another song as soon as each was done. The drum intensified. The laughter turned ever more hilarious. The old men won and lost in their moccasin gambling game, and the children wove in and out of the movement, hiding from one another, tagging around the side of a parent, teasing and sometimes dancing too. Around the middle of the night, everyone stopped to partake in a feast, a big kettle of venison. The corn soup was brought in by the fire, and children were sent back to houses and lodges for birch bark McCookcks and tin bowls. We'll stop right there because we have information about the character and setting. In box 1A, we would say, everyone took part in a big feast during the dance. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the quote. You would write down this quote at the bottom of page 141, top of page 142. Around the middle of the night, everybody stopped to partake of the feast. A big kettle of venison and corn soup was brought in by the fire, and children were sent back to houses and lodges for birch bark McCookcks and tin bowls. Press pause to write down the quote. and play when you're ready for the setting. And for the setting, we would say, the whole village is at a dance in the middle of winter. There is singing and dancing, and everyone is having a good time. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the quote. And for the quote, you would write down this first sentence on page 140. A fire was kindled in the center of the dance lodge, and its fragrant smoke rose through the central opening in the roof. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready to keep reading. We're on page 142. While they were eating, teasing, commenting on the soup, flavored with low-growing juniper berries and parched hot summer corn, something happened that disturbed everyone and changed the course of winter. Indeed, what happened changed the way Omachias and her family lived from then on. A visitor entered. He and his voyager crew had just dragged their sled of furs across from the mainland and were staying for the night. Thinking back, Omachias could even remember him sitting by the fire as close as he could, without scorching, a tired-looking man, thin and scraggly braids, coughing and feeble, a bit confused-looking, a flushed, fevered face. It was hearing of his death, in hushed tones though the next day, that she would always recall the report of it, for the horror flooded swiftly from house to house, lodge to lodge. He died of smallpox. Although the visitor's body was taken to the farthest end of the island, although everything he touched was burned, including the lodge he stayed in and the blankets he wore, although the generous family who let him in purified themselves in the sweat lodge, burned all of their belongings, and threw themselves upon the mercy of the mission, fear abounded in the settlement. Had the visitor left another, more horrible visitor behind? Sickness, death? Angeline's face was taut with worry. She knew that her kind Tin Snow, noticing the stranger's discomfort, had put her own bowl, filled with soup, into his hands. She then brought that bowl back to the lodge she shared with Fishtail, and although the bark, Onagon, was thrown far away and buried now in the snow, there was no knowing whether it would bring down the disease and its evils. During the next day, everyone watched carefully for any signs of sickness, and signs soon came. Tin Snow was the first to fall into a fever, and then those in the lodge where the sick man had stayed fell ill, one after the next. The entire family, down to the oldest grandfather and the tiniest baby, suffered in the helpless hands of the missionaries, who closed the school and kept them fed and warmed on the floors of the building, just below the blackboard, where Fishtail had finally learned to write his Chimukuman name. 6 days later, when Mama and Nokomis were hoping that the scratching sickness had passed them over, Angeline did not rise from her blankets. Overnight, the fever had seized her, and she lay hot and stifled, face red, eyes wide with fear, while Mama came up to check on her. Amachias came too, but with a stern look, Mama sent her back down the ladder. "Take care of Pinch and Niwu. Keep them downstairs," she ordered. Her voice, as she called Day and looked over the edge of the loft, was calm with despair. "Build a bark lodge outside, good and warm," she instructed. "Nokomis will care for the children. You stay out there too." And so by the end of the day, the little family was divided. Inside the house, supplied with firewood and water, Mama and Angeline battled the invisible enemy. Outside, the others slept heavily and fearfully in the lodge, made from rolls of bark, saved in a lean-to. Niwu curled with Omachias around the tiny lodge fire. Pinch huddled next to Nokomis. Day slept alone. On the third day, the evil day, Mama did not appear at the door to bring in the water Day fetched. Nokomis went in and did not return for a long time. When she did show her face, she called from the doorway to Day. "My daughter has the sickness along with Angeline. Keep the children warm, feed them good." Then she disappeared into the cabin, and Day spent the day chopping wood, hauling water, hunting, and talking to old Tallow, who had come near in grim worry. The two sat huddled over the fire for a long time, drinking cups of strong swamp tea. Finally Otallo lifted her gun, looped her rabbit snares around her wrists, and set out to hunt, now with more urgency than ever. On the 8th day, Pinch fell sick and was moved into the cabin where Nokomis could care for them all. Outside, Day worked continually, emptying pots from inside, chopping holes in ice, fishing to keep them strong, making sure the water in the kettle was always fresh and clear, their wood piled high, higher, higher. "Why are you continuing to pile up the wood?" Amachius asked him, fearful, watching how he sweated and labored at the woodpile. "Rest, Day," she begged, in fear at his fixed and set face, his deep eyes. He gave her a look of annoyance, as though from far away, and then, seeing that she offered him a cup of rabbit soup, seeing that her face was chilled with terror for him, he softened. "Go wean, my little frog," he said, pausing, his voice unusually gentle. "I cannot stop. I want to get a lot of wood ahead so I can rest a little, eh?" He smiled at her, but his smile was uneasy. The gentle exhaustion in his terrified voice terrified her more than anything that had happened so far. Okay, and then she's worried about Day getting sick, and in the middle of page 46, Niwu gets sick, and Day takes Niwu from Amachius into the cabin, and as he's walking, he stumbles, and Amachius realizes that Day and Niwu both have the fever too. And so in the middle of page 47 it says, Amachius acted without hesitation. She put out the little fire in the birch bark house. If they were all to die together, then let it be so. She would not stay outside alone and away from those she loved. No, not even if it meant her life. So she followed Niwu inside. We'll stop right there because we have information about the problem and the set solution. In box 3A, we would write, a visitor at the dance died the next morning of smallpox, and one by one, members of Amachius' family contracts the disease. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for 3B. For the quote, you would write down this quote on page 147 about Day. He didn't fall, but she knew that from that misstep that Day was ill, that he'd hidden his sickness, and that he was going into the cabin with Niwu, never to return. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the solution. In box 4A, you would write, Amachius decides to go into the cabin to take care of her family, even if it means dying of smallpox. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the quote. It says she would not stay outside alone and away from those she loved. No, not even if it meant her life. She followed Niwu inside. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the paragraph. It says, what challenge does Amachius face? What does her response reveal about her as a person?